tragedy plus time equals comedy. Stress plus time equals comedy. Embarrassment plus time equals comedy. So anything a comedian goes through, as soon as you've waited a little and the sting has gone, the first thing you want to do is make jokes out of it.
Welcome to the follow-up question. I'm your host, Michael Ashford. Come with me on a mission to help us find the common ground that I believe that exists between all of us. That mission to help us find common ground comes through the power of asking questions. My goal with this show is to uncover the experiences and desires, dreams, thoughts, and perspectives of people from all different backgrounds. And as a former journalist, I believe this is best accomplished when we ask more questions and when we listen more than we speak. And I get it, there are so many other interview shows out there. But unlike those other shows that bring on interesting guests, I want this show to be the catalyst for you and I to become more thoughtful and informed people. This week on the show, I welcome Jessica Holmes. Jessica is a comedian, an author, a public speaker, a mental health advocate. She's opened for comedians like Jerry Seinfeld and Ellen DeGeneres. She's performed at the Mecca of Comedy, Second City. And she wrote the book Depression, the Comedy, where she details her experiences with depression and comedy's place in dealing with sticky issues in our society, including depression. In this conversation, she talks about her own experience with depression and how she's gotten better at managing the demands for her time and attention through all the work that she has put in to move past that, to move beyond it. Just a fun, enlightening, interesting conversation with Jessica here, and she even gets to ask me a question, so definitely stay tuned to the end to listen for that. And one quick note, this is the pandemic, and just like probably many of you, we're all getting home repairs done. We're all making renovations to our houses. And you hear in the background several times, there's a noisy saw in the background that we kind of had to fight and work around during this conversation. But hopefully it's not too distracting. Be sure to stay to the end where I give you my thoughts on this episode, buzzsaw notwithstanding, and then be sure to sign up for my newsletter at thefollowupquestion.com/newsletter. That link is in the show notes, where every Friday I go more in depth into a key theme or topic from the conversation from that week's episode. And in this case, it's the conversation with Jessica Holmes. So without further ado, let's get into it. Here is my conversation with Jessica Holmes. Do you always feel pressure to show up and be funny in every situation?
I used to, and now I kind of just let people know in advance, if I'm not on stage, I'm not trying to be on, just because it's exhausting, right? There are some people, I know some comedians who just, that's who they are. They're funny 24/7. They're only comfortable being funny. Being with them is a bit exhausting because you're an audience member. You're not like an equal participant in the talk. But for me, I'm more like presentational. I'm more theatrical. And so I feel like, when I'm on stage is when I'm going to be funny. And the rest of the time I'm more silly. Like I'm not looking for a laugh. I'm just looking to be goofy and have fun.
You said you used to be that way. How did you get to the point where you're at now, where you don't feel that pressure?
I think part of it is having enough experience under your belt that you realize, okay, I don't need to suck up. I don't need for people to like me or, to not be myself to get ahead. And also I'm just kind of tired, like being in the pandemic. I feel like I told someone the other day, I do have spare time, but I don't have spare energy. So even when you become a parent, right, suddenly you're going, okay, I didn't know that I had to sort of prioritize what I spend free time on with my energy. But it's just more efficient to be yourself, to not try and keep track of who you're trying to please, and know that letting the chips fall where they may turns out okay if you're a hardworking, honest person.
So much of what I perceive to be comedy is observing the world around you and then making, humorous or interesting, funny observation, like bringing those observations to the forefront in a funny and humorous way. You brought up the pandemic. From your view and through that lens, how do you view what we're going through and how people are responding to this situation?
There has been an uptick in mental health issues among youth. There are higher rates of domestic abuse and loneliness, isolation, depression. Like, this is a really hard time. It doesn't look it on the surface, but it's incredibly a hard time. And so the keynotes that I've been doing throughout the pandemic have just been how to use humor to build resilience. And because it's too sad, right? If you look at, and there's nothing we can do about it. So I try to reframe it in my mind. And the example that I give is when I was about 18, I went backpacking through Europe with my grandfather. And just for about 2 weeks, I spent the first couple of months with a friend. And then my grandpa didn't want me traveling alone back to get to the airport. So he showed up and he was just laughing at everything. He's a really fun guy. And one night, this car pulls up. It's a really flashy car. There's a flashy salesman kind of guy. And he rolls down his window and he's like, quickly approach the car, quickly, come here, give me your wallet. I'm not robbing you. I just need direction, quickly, quickly. And he was so schmoozy and it was so fast. Before I knew it, my grandfather and I had given this guy our fanny packs that had our money in it. The man took the money out. He threw 2 packages out of the car and then drove away saying, see, I have not robbed you. And I was like shocked. I was freaked out. I had used money I'd been, earning $8 an hour for years working at this fabric store. And now this guy just drove off with $500 of mine. I was freaking right out. I opened the packages thinking, let this be something I can sell and maybe I can recoup some money. It turns out each package just had a little doll jacket, but with Michael Jackson style, like red and black leather, but it was tiny, like for a Cabbage Patch doll. I opened the second package and it's even smaller jacket, but identical to the first one. Like, it makes no sense. I'm standing there like an idiot with these 2 mini jackets. And my grandpa's laughing again. And I was like, what are you laughing about all the time? I just gave away all our money and all we have are these 2 stupid jackets. And he said, Jess, we weren't paying for the jackets. We were paying for the story. And then I try and look at everything in life like that. Like, we're just paying for the story. Because for me, all the hard or embarrassing or stressful things that I've been through are the things that I laugh about with my friends. Like, those are the first stories I want to commiserate about. Or when I get together with my parents at a holiday, the first thing we do is pull out these old crappy stories of like awful, embarrassing times that we've been through, and we laugh about them. And so that's how I try and treat the pandemic. That's how I try and treat marriage, kids, all of it. I'm just looking for the punchline. I'm looking for, where would the laugh track go if this was a sitcom? And so I don't know. Am I making sense here?
You absolutely are. And why humor? Like, there are so many different ways of, I'll call it coping, I think, that people can deal with a situation. You said humor builds resiliency. Why do you believe that? Why do you say that?
Humor is really good armor. And there are so many things in life that we cannot control, but happiness is lateral. So if you just increase your happiness in one area of your life, happiness goes up in all the areas. So let's say you're stuck in a job, you just can't stand your boss. It's awful. Maybe you don't have your life isn't set up in a way that you could quit that job. So you're stuck in this job. It's a bad job with a terrible boss. You can't fix that, but you can increase the joy in the rest of your life. And if you do that, the job doesn't bother you so much. The boss doesn't bother you so much. The pandemic doesn't bother you so much. So, and then comedy is also just armor. It takes the, the expression, it takes the bleep out of things, where even dealing with a difficult person, I had a therapist once who was explaining, when you are talking to that person and they're making no sense, picture that the wheels and the mechanisms running in their mind, that something has slipped off track. And now there's like chaos and blinking red lights in their head, and none of the cogs are on the wheels. And that person is just, now they're just flat out to lunch, and there's nothing you can do but smile and nod at what they're saying. And I actually started using that tactic with one person, a difficult person that was in my life. And it was really helpful, because then I felt like I'm sitting back eating popcorn in a movie theater in my mind while this person says the weird, annoying stuff that they say. And it just takes the sting out of things. So part of it, when I'm looking at the pandemic, I made a list of pros. And like, for example, I've never tried an escape room. But now it's like my house is an escape room. There's not really a way out, but you still live with it. I never thought that I would be a teacher, but now I'm the teacher, the lunch lady, the custodian. I still get picked last for teams. I get bullied quite often, but that's where we're at these days. So just trying to like reframe some of the ways that we're living right now. Those things can just take the focus away from the negative and put the focus back on the interesting.
I know you advocate a lot for mental health, and I definitely want to get into your own experiences there. I'll set it up by asking this question. Can humor become a crutch that people put up or lie on or rely on to avoid dealing with something? Can humor go too far in that?
I guess that humor could be seen as a crutch for some people who don't ever want to have a serious conversation or a serious moment. But for those people, I would say whatever works. Like I think that is better than doing drugs or like drinking excessively or having some other habit that masks your pain. I feel like comedy would probably be the least harmful. But I do know a lot of comedians that are like that, and my heart goes out to them. And I think it's really beautiful that there is this art form that will allow people to still find the beauty and happiness in life. And someone asked me once, the title of my book is Depression, the Comedy. And someone was like, oh, you can't make fun of depression. And I was like, oh, but that's what a comedian does. Like what we do is we say tragedy plus time equals comedy. Stress plus time equals comedy. Embarrassment plus time equals comedy. So anything a comedian goes through, as soon as you've waited a little and the sting has gone, the first thing you want to do is make jokes out of it, to give it context and to give it some kind of slightly more positive context than the original one that it occurred in. So I'm never making fun of anyone else's experience with depression. I am making fun of antidepressant commercials, how like cheesy and ridiculous they are. Like, I would like to live on a beach as well. I think I'll take this. Making fun of the fact that it took me 2 years to be depressed to get diagnosed as depressed. And in the meantime, I just thought it was all my husband's fault. I was like, your giant shoes are cluttering up the front doorway. No wonder I'm crying all the time. Like it was, so I'm making fun of the pain that I went through, because that is how I, as a comedian, process the world and make it a safe, happy, fun place.
That mentality that, oh, you can't make fun of these subjects like depression. Is it harder in comedy these days because of the sensitivity to certain issues? Is it harder just simply to be a comedian?
I think it's harder to be an insensitive comedian. And so comedians have to work harder to write jokes that are at your expense or at the expense of the wrongdoer. But among comedians, we know you can make fun of yourself anytime. You can make fun of what your experience has been. You can make fun of your own race. You can make fun of your own level of financial insuccess or success. What you can't do is, it's called punching down, when you take a group who's already got baggage and you make fun of them. It's sort of like the bully picking on the weak kid. And that, like, it's mean. It's doesn't get a laugh anymore. And I think that people do deserve to get called out if they're taking that sort of lazy road. Punching up is what you do when you take on the big guys. Like if you're making fun of the people in power, if you're making fun of the Harvey Weinsteins, you're making fun of the racists. And so I would say to each their own in terms of whatever baggage or crosses you have had to bear in your life, that's fair game for you to tackle. I'm not allowed to tackle your issues. For example, I got fired once from a job. It was the worst experience. And I ran into a comedian at this event and he was making fun of the fact that I got fired. And I was like, whoa, that's not for you. That's my baggage. And I own that. And it's not cool for you to be the one making fun of it. And so, yeah, I think people are a lot smarter about it. And I think it's going to serve society more.
How did you get into comedy, Jessica? And just what is your backstory there?
I barely even consider myself a real comedian because I never did that well in comedy clubs. But my area is I do well on the corporate circuit or I do well in TV. But I kind of accidentally ended up in comedy. I was at Ryerson University and we were part of this drama club and my friends and I dared each other to try stand-up. And we said, in 6 months, we're going to meet back here and we're all going to go to the amateur night at the Laugh Resort and we're all going to do a set. And so for me, I just thought like, what a fun challenge. That's awesome. And I worked hard on my comedy material. It was sort of from the perspective of, I'm this nerdy weakling and here's stories about like growing up with my mom. Like it wasn't stuff that got a standing ovation by any means, but it was passable and it was quirky. And I liken it to feeling like when you get on a roller coaster, you know, that moment when the bar goes down and it starts and you have this horrible, remorseful feeling where you're like, why would I do this? This is so stupid. I would never want this. I don't want stress. I want safety. I just want to be home in my bed with my parents taking care of me. That's how it feels that first time getting on stage. It is terrifying. My knees were weak. I picked up a stranger's glass and drank from it because I felt like I was dying. And then I got my first laugh and I felt like all is forgiven. I get it. I want this. I want this feeling.
You mentioned the difference between going into a comedy club and the work that you do now, speaking, being on stage. What's the difference for you?
I think that club comedians are people who are genuinely happy and comfortable in their own skin, that they like the unexpected. They like that the audience might heckle them. They like knowing that there's going to be some dead air, some silence. Whereas I'm a bit more of a planner. Like I'm intimidated by the club scene. I'm not dark by any means. I'm not edgy. And so I always felt out of place in those comedy clubs. And I felt like I don't belong here. And I would just get intimidated when it was like, if someone in the audience would heckle me, I would just be like, you win. And I'd like walk off the stage. Whereas when I improvise on TV or when I improvise with a corporate audience, there's part of me that just feels like, okay, this is home. I know these people and I have enough experience. I've been doing the corporate shows for almost 20 years now, where whatever happens, I've seen it before, I've handled it before, I know I'm going to be okay. So I do feel like I can take charge in a room like that. Whereas if I go to some basement comedy club with 6 people in the audience, I would find that incredibly intimidating.
I watched a video of you describing the highs and lows of the comedy circuit or the life of a comedian. Can you describe that a little bit more, like the highs and lows of that lifestyle?
Yes. Okay. So part of it's hard to pinpoint a single cause for depression, but I do believe that part of what supported me being in a depression was the stop and go lifestyle of a comedian, that to get on stage in front of 1,000 people and command an audience for half an hour and be the boss of the stage, you need a certain amount of self-confidence. But then you also need to be able, when you come off that stage and you don't get hired for 2 months and all of your friends are working and you're just looking at tumbleweeds, you also need this humility to suddenly say, the world doesn't need me right now, and that's perfectly okay. I can't book a diaper commercial, and that's okay. Like it's having to puff yourself up and then shrink yourself down. And when I got diagnosed with depression, the first thing I said to the therapist was, okay, so what new career am I going to find? Because this one's not working. She's like, well, maybe instead of throwing away your career of 15 years, maybe instead we just work on making your life more stable, so that whether you're on stage in front of 1,000 people or you're going 2 months without working, you feel the same and you are the same person. And what that looks like is every day I have boxes I tick off. Have I exercised? Have I meditated? Have I talked to people who fill me up? Have I given back to the world? Have I worked on something that makes me feel creatively awesome? And so now, on days when I'm working or not working, my life looks a lot the same. My life is stable. It has meaning. It has love. It has self-care. And it's a work in progress. Like every single day for the rest of my life, I'll be working on my mental health. And that's okay with me because it's a pretty great trade-off. But it is, it is my job now. Like my career is comedy, but my job is taking care of myself.
Mm. Do enough people do that?
I wish everyone had the time to do that. And what I try and do in my talks is, instead of saying to people like, just meditate for an hour every day. Like, look, 1% of the population has the luxury to meditate for an hour a day. For the rest of us, it's here's a 20-second breathing exercise. Here is a quick positive psychology 3 questions you can ask yourself every day. Here are like things that people can do while they're still busy. Because, for example, I was giving a virtual talk about mental health to a group of nurses at long-term care homes. These people don't have 10 seconds to themselves. And so I had to come up with ways that they could just implement quick, easy rechargers into their life. And, for all of us, it's a struggle. Even don't you just social media? I joke that social media is like a mean time travel machine, because you go on it for 2 minutes and then poof, suddenly it's an hour later and you feel bad about yourself. And so I put timers on each of the apps where I was like, you know what? I'm only going to do Instagram for 15 minutes a day, and I'm only going to do Facebook 15 minutes a day. Well, like I do 3 or 4 of those apps, and suddenly that's an hour out of every day gone. So you have to pick and choose, right? We're busy people. We don't value downtime enough. We don't value just being, and we certainly don't value mental health as a society. And in terms of like sick leave and parental leave and stuff like that. So no is the answer to your question. It's a long answer.
Jessica, you've referenced now several times your diagnosis of depression and the ways that you've come out of that. Can you just take us, myself, the listeners, back to understanding how depression looked for you? Because I think it looks, I know prior to, getting involved in therapy and my wife getting involved in therapy, like it just, and full disclosure, I know you had postpartum depression. My wife did as well. So I kind of understand a little bit from the husband side what that looked like. It doesn't always look like, I think like the commercials make it look like, does it not?
Yes, absolutely. I dedicated actually 2 chapters of my book just to talking about my marriage, because as you know, it's the partners or the closest relatives to the people who are going through depression who kind of suffer through it a lot with that person. My depression, because I'm a people pleaser and I'm an ambitious career person as well, no one would have known that I was going through a depression except for my husband and my closest friends, because I hid it from people, and I hid it from myself largely too. So what my day would have looked like is on a day when I wasn't working, I would wake up and put on a brave face for my kids. As soon as they went out the door, I would go lay down on the sofa and I would watch TV for an hour, and I would hate myself for sitting there doing nothing, wasting my time. And then I'd cry about that for an hour, about how useless I am. And then I'd eat, I'd make food and eat on the sofa, still crying more about the wasted time. And, I would tell myself, I'm useless. I don't deserve success. People feel sorry for me. People are embarrassed that my career has stalled. And then finally at, 4 or 5 p.m., my kids would come back home and I would dry my tears and try and make up for lost time and try and be a good mom. And then I'd have trouble sleeping that night because I would feel like I've wasted my day and I'm such a failure. And this kind of just kept going and going. And of course, my husband was like, honey, this is weird. And I was like, this is just what it is to be an artist. Like, my shows take a lot of energy out of me. And this is what artists do. We have to recover between shows. So I'd make up excuses like that, or I would just say, hey, I think I'm low iron, or it's your big shoes cluttering up the front door. I have no energy to deal with life because, you and I don't get along. And so it just kind of got worse and worse. And then finally my husband couldn't handle it anymore and just said, I think we need marriage counseling. And I was like, I'll never go see a marriage counselor. And he's like, what if I find a place next to a Starbucks? And I was like, fine. So we went and saw a therapist. And in that first meeting, she was like, I'm feeling a lot of anger and sadness from you, and I think you might be depressed. And suddenly then the last 2 years flashed before my eyes. And I was like, whoops, shoot, I missed that. Now I get it.
In that moment where, like, you seem to have accepted that, I'll call it diagnosis, but your therapist saying that, you seem to have accepted it right for what it was. How did you receive that news?
Well, and this might not make sense to anyone who hasn't been through a depression, but some of us who go through depression really are deluding ourselves into not thinking it's depression. Because for me, knowing it was depression was, on one hand, it was positive because it meant I don't have to get a divorce and change careers and go lose everything I love in life. What I could do is just recover from depression. And then maybe all those things would bring me joy again. But of course, it's a negative in terms of I had already been through postpartum depression and I had no reason to be depressed again. So what I really don't like about having been through 2 major depressive episodes is, well, now they could just happen anytime. Like, if there's no cause, it just feels like it's going to be willy-nilly depressions all over the place. And that was scary because it's really frightening to feel like something could just come out of nowhere like that again. And that's why I work so hard now. And I can even feel when I'm starting to go down that path a little bit. And right away, I'll try and make adjustments in my life. I'll ask for what I need. And it used to embarrass me to ask for what I needed. Like, I felt like, look, I'm apparently a professional and I'm a speaker and I'm an author, and I don't want to appear high maintenance or weak or, show everyone my struggles. But it just beats the alternative. So now I will say, no, I can't do a shoot at 2 a.m. because I'll pay for it with my mental health having trouble sleeping for a week, making up for it. No, I can't do 3 shows in one day because that's not good for my mental health to have such an adrenaline high and low over and over again. So I just flat out tell people. I even had a thing recently where someone wanted me to sign a contract, and I was like, well, I can sign a contract, but the second something becomes harmful to my well-being, I can't stick around anyway. So I'll sign the contract, but health comes first. And it was really, truly amazing. The producer was like, I get it. And we're just going to make this a healthy place. How about that? So I was like, yeah. But I'm 47 now, and it's only this year that I've been able to ask for what I need without apologizing profusely or feeling embarrassed about it.
That right there, what you just said, the apologizing for it, the perhaps feeling embarrassed for it. For you in your life, what was the thing holding you back from being that open and honest and vulnerable about it? And what do you think holds other people back from it?
Michael, that's a very deep question. That is, you are a natural therapist. I would say what was holding me back was a low sense of self-worth, low self-esteem, and feeling like my life is about pleasing other people and not really feeling entitled to stick up for myself and what I need. And so it was actually only during this pandemic that I was having this talk with my therapist, and I was just saying, oh, the pandemic's really hard, and this thing is hard, and that thing is hard. And she pointed out that I wasn't feeling comfortable asking for what I needed or sticking up for myself with other people. And she said, do you love yourself? And I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't understand the question. Is that even a thing? I mean, are there people who love themselves? Like, it was such a foreign concept to me. And she's like, yeah, there's people who love themselves and who think they deserve great things in the world, and they're proud of who they are, and they're proud of who they are as parents. And anyhow, I just had a meltdown because that was the opposite of how I talked to myself and how I felt about myself. Like, I was a healthy person in terms of I was pretty happy in life, but I was really far from loving myself. And so she's the one who said, meditation is a pretty great way to connect with yourself and to know what really being at peace with yourself feels like. And so I did this intensive 45-day meditation course, and that, I think, was the tipping point in terms of getting me to feel like, oh my gosh, I think I might be worthy of love and worthy of asking for what I need in life. And doesn't it shock you sometimes, though, that like the learning curve never stops? Because I'll feel like, but I dealt with postpartum depression and I grew from that and I learned. And then I dealt with regular depression and I grew from that and I learned. And now I friggin' have to do this. Like, there's so many. Oh, thank you. Thank you, universe, for all these opportunities to learn. But it shocks me that there's, still a ways to go, and that you can feel like you've come so far and there's still more growing to do.
How has then your presentations and the talks that you give, how has that been influenced by what you just said? The realization and understanding that, man, this growth never, if you're intentional about it, it never stops. How has that changed?
It's one thing that I'm relieved about. I had a terrific agent years ago tell me, as a speaker, unless you have a PhD in a certain subject, you cannot get up on stage and profess your experience as everyone's experience or as the only truth that's out there. All you can do is present your experience and your take on things, and then let people pick and choose what applies to their life. And so, fortunately, all this time, these talks that I've been giving, I've only been sharing things that have either been proven through studies to be effective, or that I in my own life have found effective. Like, I've never been fake about it or saying everyone can be happier if they just do this. I've always tried to be extremely real about it, that life is hard and there's hard things in it. Here's a few things I did and that helped me. And so it's terrific now when I give talks. I just feel like I keep, over the last 12.5 years, I just keep adding these new lessons that life gives me and new anecdotes. And again, just letting the audience pick and choose what works for them, what makes a difference for them, and also reacting to the world. Like, I used to have a keynote that was about ambition and going after what you want in life. And I stopped giving that keynote because I was just like, I just don't care about ambition anymore. Like that's not something that's important to me. And I would feel fraudulent hopping on stage and saying like, isn't it important to be successful? Instead, I want to just get on stage and being like, being okay can be hard work sometimes. And here's a few things that worked for me. I feel like life continues to teach. And so I will just continue to add to whatever experience I've had and share that.
Jessica, I have to ask, the lack of self-love, the lack of feeling, I'll use the word worthy, that you were struggling with, where did that get its roots? Where's the genesis of that?
I don't know what was nature and what was nurture. I know that I had a very loving, happy childhood with two parents who are still to this day like best friends to me. We still love each other's company as much now as we did when I was 2 years old. I know that I did go through some things in the early years where I felt more sensitive to them than other people would have. Like if a kid bullied me and pushed me in a puddle, instead of feeling like, hey, jerk, and like shoving them back and then going on my way, I would like lay there crying for 2 hours. So I just was a sensitive person, and I seem to have carried that sensitivity into adulthood. And my life has this juxtaposition, right, where I can be starring on a TV show and to the outside world look like someone who's very accomplished, but then on the inside feel really surprised that I find regular parts of being emotionally healthy harder than I would have thought. So I just try and be honest about that part of it. I don't know the reasons specifically, but I thank God every day, or the universe, or Oprah, or whoever's pulling our strings up there. That it seems to have skipped a generation, and that my kids don't have the sensitivity. Like nothing makes me feel better than when they just roll their eyes at me if I've been annoying or if I've been whatever. I'm like, yes, they're not internalizing it. They're not blaming themselves. That's beautiful. They think I'm the weirdo. Perfect. That's really good to me.
How then do you take positive feedback from a talk or from a show that you've done? I'm interested to know how that resonates with you.
That's the whole reason that I do what I do. Like it's not always easy being a performer. I think before the pandemic hit, I did 45 shows out of town per year on average. And like, that's a lot of travel. It's a lot, but I'm doing it because I genuinely feel what the audience gets out of it. Not every audience member, not everyone's curious to learn about mental health, but their boss makes them, come into the theater and learn along with the rest of them. But I always feel that at least a good portion of the audience will be strengthened or have a softer perspective to love other people going through mental health issues. And that's just what life is about for me. It's just about giving back and making the world a better place. So that's what I'm in it for, is that feeling of, yes, I made a person feel better, and that's terrific. And it makes it so worth it.
Is there a time or a situation or a piece of feedback that has really struck you or stuck with you as particularly impactful?
Yeah, there are moments. Usually someone will be talking about their spouse having been through a depression, or their child having been through a depression. And there's one thing that I say to audiences, and I know it's impactful. It's that you cannot fix someone else's depression. There's nothing you can do that would make someone else not be depressed or not have bipolar disorder. Because we cannot fix each other's minds. But what you can do is love someone, be there for them, ask if there's anything you can do to help, and then just lay a healthy groundwork, give them a healthy space so that they then feel comfortable flourishing. But there is no point in giving advice. And like that just compounds the guilt or shame that a person already feels. And just saying that to audiences, I would say that's the one piece of advice that has made the biggest difference to people trying to love somebody else through a depression. And also just to take the pressure off themselves, right? It's, trying to keep your head above water and then trying to save someone else at the same time is a lot of work. So I say, well, did you know that in order to help save someone else, all you have to do is love and validate what they're going through. You don't actually have to be on the hook to fix anybody. And I think that that's made some people's relationships easier. And that has meant a lot to me.
Why is that so hard for us to not rush in and try and fix things? Fix in air quotes.
Yeah. And you know what? And like, I'll say it on stage all the time, but then I'll come home and try and fix my kids' lives or, helicopter parent. And so I get it. I get that it's really difficult, but it comes from a place of love. And I just think it's human nature that when we love someone, we're like, oh, I'll take care of you. Let me fix that for you. And it's counterintuitive to say, you mean I can't make a difference for you? But like, all I wanted when I was depressed, I wanted my mom to sit next to me and watch trashy TV with me and not say a word. Like, I was like, I want 3 hours of Dr. Phil back to back, and I don't want to hear a peep out of you. And it was like, that was great. Cause then I just felt like, okay, I'm not alone. I have support. I know that she loves me. And now we can just sit here. And that was the one thing that would quiet my mind, was just to feel like safe and believed. And nobody needs to understand me. I know that you can't magically understand what someone else is going through, but it feels really good to feel believed that, oh, if you say you're depressed, I believe you that you're depressed, instead of, because I did have relationships where people don't, like, on paper, you don't look like you should be depressed. You have a house, you have a husband. I don't have a husband, but you don't see me getting depressed. Like, but I'm like, it's not an attitude problem. It's a mental illness. And it's not based on whether you have a house or a partner. It's based on a number of different factors that still aren't really understood. But there are some things you can do to help treat or prevent, and here they are.
Jessica, what is something that you've learned recently?
I recently learned that laughter predates speech. So early man was laughing before they were even talking. And I find that incredible. And apparently they used it to forge bonds or to welcome people, or even to resolve a dispute. And I thought that that's pretty cool and just shows how powerful it is to just have a laugh and choose happiness.
When might humor then be inappropriate?
So I tell this story. I don't tell it on stage because it would get me in hot water, but back when I said tragedy plus time equals comedy, and you can only make fun of your baggage, you cannot make fun of other people's baggage. And there was this moment where my husband didn't follow both of those rules. He broke both those rules. His beautiful father had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And he was explaining that things have moved on, have progressed, and now the tissue is beyond repair. And my husband, thinking that he would lighten the moment, did this little weird rapping rhyme where he was like, so the issue is the tissue. Oh. It was like awful. It was awful. His mother was mortified. The doctor was looking at him like, what is wrong with you? And his dad just like shook his head and put his head in his hands. And my husband was like, it was too soon. It was too soon, wasn't it? And I was like, yes, that is too soon. And it's not your joke to tell. You are not the one who is ill. So you don't get to make that joke. So that is wrong. Definitely in the workplace. I think, again, if you are the brunt of the joke, if the joke is about something that you did that was embarrassing or a mistake that you made, then absolutely have fun with it. But nobody wants like the boss to make fun of one of their underlings' weaknesses.
Jessica, what is a question that you wish you were asked more?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm going to be honest, Michael, I wish I was asking you more questions. I want you to tell me more stuff, but I guess that's not the point of the podcast.
It is not.
Michael's laughing at me right now. A question I don't know. I can't, I guess as I grow, as I become an adult, I like thinking more about the end game and what's in the present moment and what's the big picture, and to just slow down. So I enjoy introspective questions like that. And the question that I like to ask people if they're going through a hard time is, what is something you can do for yourself? And what I like about that question is you are not giving someone advice. You're not telling them how to do something. You're asking them, hey, buddy, in your wheelhouse, what's something that would make you feel better that you can do? And when I ask people that, I can see the relief on their face of them being like, oh yeah, like I guess I can choose to do something nice for myself. I don't know how to answer it, Michael.
I'll turn it over to you. I'll let you ask me a question. It's fine.
Nice. Okay. So has there ever been one of these podcasts you've done where you have felt that the discussion was healing for you in some way that surprised you?
Healing. Yeah. I think my whole thesis is, I think we as human beings, we all have some sort of common ground. There may be issues that we disagree with, that we vehemently disagree with, but there are still these big, hairy, gaudy issues out there. And when we can find common ground, then we can start to move forward just in a one-to-one relationship. We can move forward as a community, as a people, as a society, like however big you want to take it. And the talks that I have on this show where it is other people confirming my thesis there are just, I get goosebumps. I'm getting goosebumps right now just talking about it. So when I think of, our friend Leanne and how Dr. Leanne Davey, and how she talks about bringing empathy into an argument, into those disagreements, and asking questions to not bring facts to an argument and instead work through the emotions of an argument. That discussion with her was distinctly profound. 2 weeks ago from you and I talking right now, I released an episode with Stan Pearson. And, I asked him the question, he's a black man. And he's a public speaker and an author. Well, how does it feel to him to be almost typecast as the diversity guy? Mm-hmm. And how does he approach those situations where he feels uncomfortable? Like those things, when I get the chance to ask those questions and know, like the person on the other side knows that my heart is, I simply want to learn and grow from this experience, growth, like what you just said. Those are the moments on this show and in these interviews that just make my heart sing.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's awesome.
And selfishly, a big reason why I do it, because I really like having those moments.
Yeah. Well, and for me, I guess that's a little part of why it made me rethink comedy, or my approach to comedy, when I looked at how divided the United States is in terms of left wing or right wing, and that the space between them is growing, and now there's less and less and less to agree on. And so now I feel like the trend for comedy right now should be about common ground. It should be about what are the things we can all as humans agree on. So I think comedy is going to get a bit deeper. I think it's going to be more about like relationships, like with the pet peeves in relationships. And I loved Chris Rock's last special, Tambourine, where it was, the point of his special is to say, relationships are hard. Marriage is hard, especially if you want it to be all about you. And sometimes you just have to be the backup player. Sometimes you have to just play the tambourine and let your spouse be the star of the show. And I love that because that's a universal energy that anyone who's ever been in a relationship might have felt something like that. And I'm noticing the kind of comedies I want to watch now are not just comedies that reiterate my own beliefs, but are comedies that can help me start to understand other people's perspectives. And for example, I'm so grateful for the Black Lives Matter movement and the fact that now this entire giant chunk of the population that used to not be heard on what their experience was. I'm so happy that's coming to the forefront. And now we're going to understand each other better, and everyone deserves to be heard. So I do hope that that's the way we're moving. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the way that comedy is moving, so that we're not just trying to reinforce necessarily, we're the right and we're the best, or you're the left and you're the best. But instead to just say, like, as human beings, I want to know about what you go through and why you think the way you do. And here's my thing, and focus on the commonality, like you said, because it's beautiful, right? We need connection, especially with all of us pushed apart and isolated and lonely with this pandemic. It's like we need community more than ever. And we need to know we have common struggles more than ever. So amen to what you said.
Thank you. You mentioned really early on, I asked a question about the state of comedy, and you mentioned that, well, if you're an insensitive comic, these times can be really hard. What do you say to the people who, push back against that and say, like, comedy is in place to push boundaries, to make you feel uncomfortable, to question, what is perceived as politically correct? What do you say to that?
And I still want people to do that, but I want them to do it in the way that someone like Dave Chappelle does it, where he is, again, like I said, he's punching up. He is making, not in all of the examples, but in some of his specials, he is taking on the status quo. He is taking on bigotry. He is taking on these opponents who should be taken on. And what I'm not into are people doing comedy that shames certain groups. Like I think we're all finished with jokes like dumb blonde jokes. I think we're all finished collectively with sexist jokes and with jokes about groups who have had a harder time than the rest of us. I'm all for challenging the status quo when it comes to breaking down barriers. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify that.
Yeah. No, hey, it's perfectly okay for me to make fun of my baldness, but not for you to make fun of my baldness.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? Like an example is my daughter's name is Alexa. And I couldn't even believe it. We were at the doctor's office the other day and someone was taking our health cards and he started making fun of the name Alexa. And I actually said, that's not your joke to make. Alexa can make that joke. You can't make that joke. And it's actually been really hard for my daughter to kind of deal with picking on that. And so I just feel like, punch up, people. Don't punch down. Don't make fun of a weaker subject or someone who's already the brunt of the joke. Like, take on the people who pollute the world. Take on the people who are in charge of systemic racism. Take on those foes and leave the people who can't fend for themselves to just get by.
I think that's a fantastic place to leave it, Jessica. Thank you so much. How can people connect with you and follow your work and all the stuff that you've talked about here today?
Oh, thank you so much. JessicaHolmes.com is my website, and the link to anything is there. And, I'm like everyone else. I'm just treading water throughout this pandemic and looking forward to life on the other side of it. So I don't even think I've updated my website in a while, but absolutely, I'm still doing the speaking and I love it. Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it. And thanks for asking me a question. That rarely happens. So.
Oh my gosh. Awesome.
Many thanks to Jessica for sharing her story and perspective on the show today. My quick thoughts about this episode. Look, comedy is fantastic for dealing with issues, and in a lot of ways, like Jessica said, much better at helping you deal and sort through issues than the other things that you could turn to. But make sure that you punch up. Make sure that you're not doing it at the undue expense of someone else and their situation, just to make yourself feel better. I'll be talking about that more in the newsletter this week. So again, go to the link in the show notes and subscribe to the newsletter. Now, please do me and Jessica a huge favor. Share this episode with someone you know who might also find some value in listening to our conversation. Share the episode with your network. Help spread the good word about the importance of asking more questions and listening. And if you like the conversations with the amazing guests like Jessica that I have on each week, be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Subscribing also helps the show gain more reach. And more reach is what I could definitely use, so help me out here. If you ever want to get in touch with me, you can always email me. It's michael@thefollowupquestion.com, or you can go to thefollowupquestion.com and reach out there. I'll catch you on the next episode of The Follow-Up Question, and until then, keep asking questions.